Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Big news in Canadian politics this week. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith have struck a deal that could reshape the country's energy future. Ottawa has agreed to enable the export of Alberta oil through a deep sea port to Asian markets, and if necessary, even adjust the West Coast tanker ban to make it happen. The two leaders signed a Memorandum of Understanding committing both the federal and Alberta governments to pursue building a pipeline to the West Coast. But there are conditions. Ottawa's commitment hinges on the project being approved as one of national interest, and it must include opportunities for Indigenous co-ownership and shared economic benefits. Not everyone is on board. BC Premier David Eby calls the proposal a distraction, warning it could become an energy vampire draining federal, Indigenous, and provincial resources. The Coastal First Nations president insists the project will never happen and says the tanker ban is not up for negotiation. I'm Mark Day, and today on The Big Story, CityNews Parliament Hill reporter Cormac Mac Sweeney joins us as we dive into what this agreement means, the political fault lines it exposes, and the big question: is this the start of a new era for Canadian energy, or just another pipeline debate destined to stall? Cormac, thanks for joining us in The Big Story today. Very busy 24 hours in the political world in this country. What exactly was announced between the Prime Minister and the Premier of Alberta, and why is it significant?
Yeah, well, this is a memorandum of understanding, and it doesn't actually mean that something is happening, but it sets out the terms for what could happen moving forward, sets a number of conditions, a number of goals from both sides, from the Alberta government and the federal government. So no shovels will not be in the ground tomorrow on a pipeline, but that is the hope, that is the end goal from this MOU. And so this framework for a pipeline would basically see the federal government back a pipeline project to the Major Projects Office. And that's the office that the Prime Minister set up in the wake of the election in the spring to try and fast track a number of major big projects, to try and really spur economic activity for Canada, to really stave off the economic impacts that we've seen from the U.S. trade war, with President Donald Trump slapping tariffs on almost everything that Canadians see. But nonetheless, the government was really trying to focus on things that could really help diversify our markets. And of course, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith saw an opportunity there to try and get a new pipeline built for the oil sands. So this project is getting the sort of federal approval to go through, but at the same time, it is the Major Projects Office that does the evaluation and gives the green light or red light on projects to say whether or not they should receive any speedy approvals. And it's not going to happen tomorrow either in terms of an application, because there is no application before the Major Projects Office yet. However, this MOU does have a deadline for that to happen. So July 1st is when the Alberta government and whatever private company they get on board for this to submit the application to the Major Projects Office. So that's one element of all of this, is when they can get that application in. But there's a variety of other things involved here that will see the feds both sort of set the conditions, if you will, that would be right for a pipeline to be built. And this is something that Premier Danielle Smith has been pushing for some time, the relaxing of environmental laws. But then also it's going to see the federal government relax some increase, rather. It's going to see the federal government increase some other environmental laws as well, which they say will help reach net zero by 2050 in Alberta. So among the terms would essentially be an industrial carbon pricing agreement. And so they're going to be working on that over the next number of months, and something should be in place by April 1st. That would see the industrial carbon price go to about $130 per ton. And the goal there is to reduce emissions by 70 5% over the next 10 years. But there's also an agreement from the federal Liberals to suspend clean electricity regulations in the province of Alberta, and they won't be implementing that oil and gas emissions cap, something that the premier had been pushing for some time. And here's the big one that's created a lot of controversy around this project, and that revolves around the federal tanker ban. So back in 2019, there was a law put in place by the then Trudeau government to ban tankers for a lot of the northwest coast of British Columbia. And specifically, there's one straight off of Prince Rupert that is seen as a potentially dangerous route for tankers, but could allow for more movement of product, in this case, crude oil from Alberta, to get to Asian markets. But there is a clause here that says if everything turns out well, if the application is approved by the major projects office, and if it is required, then there could be exemptions made to that federal tanker ban. That has greatly upset British Columbia as well as coastal First Nations, causing a lot of tension and a lot of controversy around this project.
Reaction to this announcement was immediate. Premier David Eby in BC called the proposal an energy vampire. The coastal First Nations president has already said the project will never happen. How much weight do these voices carry in shaping the future of this? What type of precedent does it set if this pipeline were to move forward?
If this were to move forward, I mean, there are already some environmental groups out there who have put out releases saying that this essentially is allowing each province to determine which climate policies they want to follow as long as they can cut a deal on it with the prime minister. And so environmental groups are really upset about this. The other on the flip side of that, though, you have the conservatives as well, who are not happy that the prime minister hasn't just steamrolled through and made sure that a pipeline was going to be built. In the lead up to this, it was Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre who was asking the prime minister in question period, will this MOU come with a date on when oil will start to flow, on when shovels will be in the ground? I was able to chat with a number of Conservative MPs on their way into the House of Commons, and the most common refrain I heard from them is, I'll believe it when I see it, or I'll believe it when shovels are in the ground. So there's some skepticism definitely from the Conservative side on the flip side to that environmental side. And so we have a lot of different opinions depending on where you land on this. And I think the issue and the problem for the Liberal government right now is navigating the criticism on all sides from this. You have the left who seems really upset. You have some on the right who say it's not good enough because it doesn't actually get anything built. There's still a lot left to be done. It's going to be very difficult for the Carney government to try and navigate this without being impacted in terms of popularity right now. In terms of the polls, we'll have to wait and see how that really shakes out. But definitely in British Columbia, there seems to be a lot of anger around this project. And you saw in the MOU as well a number of different measures to try and address the main concerns coming from the coastal First Nations and the BC government. One is economic benefits. So in the MOU, it does say that BC will have to share in the economic benefits from this project, and there needs to be Indigenous co-ownership of a pipeline that would make sure that Indigenous groups involved would see a big financial benefit from this as well. There also are going to be talks now between the Alberta and federal governments and the BC government. They said that as a condition, they will start immediately to engage with British Columbia, but also start talks with impacted First Nations. But, you mentioned the coastal First Nations there. They said flat out that this MOU changes nothing, that they still think this will never happen. There is no way that they're going to support this. We heard similar things in the lead up to this from the BC government. So it's going to be very interesting to see if they can cut deals, what has to be in there to cut a deal. I spoke with a couple of experts about this, both before and after the MOU came out, and both of them said this is going to be a very steep hill to climb Very long road as well for Alberta and the federal government if they want to make a pipeline a reality. And in the meantime, there's a lot of backlash. Some people calling the MOU insulting because the Prime Minister said that, he really does care about Indigenous involvement in this. And they said, well, if that's the case, this is from NDP MP Gord Johns, if that was the case, why weren't they sitting at the table at the start of these talks? And there were several experts, political scientists, who said that they believe that the federal government mishandled this from the start by not including BC, by not including Indigenous groups and impacted First Nations right away, because if they had done that, it may have been a little bit different. I mean, there might be questions about whether we had an MOU by today, if there were broader negotiations underway earlier on, but the government seems to want to try and bring those negotiations in now. But there's a short runway for this. You have an application that's supposed to come out on July 1st at the very latest, according to this MOU, to try and get this project coming through. We still don't have a private proponent on top of all of this. No private company has jumped on board yet. So just, it really is a lot of different reaction to this. That's not, it doesn't seem like it's going to be working out well politically for the government at the moment, but we'll have to wait and see because it's not only, these external issues that they're dealing with. The Liberals also have some internal struggles as well.
We've had a lot of external reaction, but, you just mentioned internal reaction. Cultural Minister Steven Guilbeault has resigned from cabinet after the Prime Minister signed this Memorandum of Understanding. The vowed environmentalist and climate activist has been a key fixture in the Liberal government for the past 6 years and says he will remain in the House of Commons as an MP. What does this signal, and how do you think the caucus, the Liberal Party itself, will be handling this decision by the Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, it was clear that Steven Guilbeault was not really happy with where things were heading. He hadn't really been talking to reporters over the days leading up to the MOU. We're also seeing that from a number of BC Liberal MPs who have refused to talk to reporters on their way in and out of the House of Commons or in and out of their caucus meeting. So I think there will be a lot of eyes on them to see whether Steven Guilbeault is the first of several or maybe he's a one-off. There were questions just weeks ago about Chris D'Entremont defecting to the Liberals from the Conservatives and leading to speculation that there could be more on the way. And so far there haven't been. So we'll see what happens with the Liberal ranks here, or, the caucus chair coming out of their most recent caucus meeting ahead of this MOU claimed that there was unity, claimed that they had a robust discussion and it was a healthy discussion, but that all the Liberals were happy. And now we have Steven Guilbeault quitting cabinet. He does remain as a Liberal MP, mind you, so he's not abandoning the party, but out of principle, he's decided to step down. He issued a 3-page statement on this and did say that obviously he disagrees fundamentally with the MOU that's been signed with the government, but he also mentioned a number of other things that seem to be on his mind over the last number of months, noting that several elements of the climate action plan that he had worked on as Minister of the Environment have already been or are going to be dismantled as a result of a number of actions under the Carney's prime ministership. He said, the consumer carbon price, that was gone. And it was one of the first things that Mark Carney did as prime minister. The zero emission vehicle standard, the oil and gas sector emissions cap, which is another one of those things that will be going away with the pipeline being built, and the framework to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies, clean electricity regulation. So he says that those measures remain essential to climate action. And as a result, he's decided to step down from his role in the Carney cabinet. And it's never a good look when you have a cabinet minister stepping down out of principle to what your government is trying to do. It was just a number of months ago where, not quite as dramatic as what we saw with Chrystia Freeland when she stepped down as finance minister on the day of the economic statement. But having a former environment minister step down from your cabinet on the day that you reach this MOU pipeline deal is not the look I think the Prime Minister's office was going for today. They wanted it to be seen as a big economic boost for Canada, some stability for the energy sector that would help get things moving on a potential pipeline. That's not what a lot of people are going to be talking about in the evening news and the morning after as a result of this decision for Guilbeault to step away. So, there's a lot of fallout that they're going to have to deal with, and caucus relations is a big one. A lot of parties and a lot of governments can face a lot of problems. Just ask former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about caucus sourness leading to eventually worse things for him in his tenure. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Mark Carney, but I think there has to be more of a focus on caucus relations right now if he wants Steven Guilbeault to be a one-off and not have this turn into other problems. Because what we saw with Justin Trudeau was it started with one or two MPs expressing frustration, and that continued to grow, turned to loud shouts in the fall of last year, and then the resignation from Chrystia Freeland and the decision in January of the Prime Minister to step down. So these sorts of things can build if it's not just one voice. So I think there's going to be a political conundrum for Steven Guilbeault here, and there are 20 Liberal MPs in British Columbia. So, they have to be thinking as well about what might happen with those seats, whether they could pick up more seats in Alberta to offset any losses they could have in British Columbia. And the reason why I'm bringing up another election, even though the government's not falling at the moment, this is still a minority government. It could fall at any moment. And so we always have to think in the mindset, as all political parties do in a minority government, that an election could always be just around the bend.
You hit on a couple of points there, but talk about a drastic change from a year ago today. Justin Trudeau was the prime minister, now Mark Carney, and he's really changing course with this party, even making this proposal with the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. A very drastic change for this party in a year.
Yeah, it really is stunning. And, this might improve Liberal fortunes in Alberta. This might improve some, national view of the Carney government in some ways. Maybe it doesn't, but it definitely puts the Liberals in a dicier position in British Columbia. But, just the Alberta relation alone is fascinating to see, because a year ago, there was a rise in talk about Alberta separatism. There was a lot of rhetoric around that, and the Premier was using that as a political tool against Justin Trudeau. Things were not going great for Trudeau at the time, and it seemed like he was going to fight to try and see another election, but that's not how it ended up, and a lot has changed since then. But also Mark Carney, the NDP is criticizing him as basically a conservative, and we've even seen the Conservatives criticize Carney's policies as, they say it's a failed attempt to copy theirs, a copy and paste on a number of different fronts. But he's definitely governing the country in a much more business-like manner than we saw Justin Trudeau. It has been a stark change, but this is what people voted for in the spring. They voted for him to try and turn the economy around. He has done a lot of things to try and do that, to try and address the impact, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, there are criticisms of his approach from opposition parties about whether he's been able to get the goals that he set out for himself when he was in the election campaign in terms of dealing with Donald Trump. But, again, this is what Canadians had voted for, and we'll see how things turn out moving forward, because I think he's in a different position now than he was just a couple of months ago. And this resignation from Steven Guilbeault is not going to help. So we'll have to see how this all plays out, because politics is a very interesting game, And you have the Conservatives in an interesting position as well, where you have Pierre Poilievre, whose personal likability ratings are really not doing great right now, although his party in general is neck and neck with the Liberals. And you have the NDP seeing a little bit of a bump up in their national numbers after being just decimated in the last election, down to 7 MPs. And they're going through a leadership contest right now. So, it's an interesting time to be covering politics.
You do a fantastic job at covering it. Thank you so much, Cormac. Appreciate your time today.
Anytime.
And that was the big story. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all of your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.